Let me paint you a picture. You wake up on a Monday morning and you're feeling fine. Not bad, not great. You scroll through your phone, maybe check your email, maybe glance at social media, and somewhere in the back of your mind, there's this little thought. I'll start when I get a sign. You've probably said it before, or at least thought it. When the time feels right, when I get a clear signal, then I'll know it's time to move forward. It sounds reasonable. It sounds patient. It sounds even a little wise, doesn't it? But here's the truth. Waiting for a sign is one of the most effective ways to do absolutely nothing for the rest of your life. We imagine the sign will come like in the movies. A job opportunity will fall into our laps. A mentor will appear out of nowhere. The stars will align in a way so obvious that we're foolish for not acting sooner. But life doesn't work like that. There is no dramatic musical score. There is no slow motion montage where the universe reveals its grand plan for you. The sign isn't coming. We wait because waiting feels safe. It feels like we're being careful. But what we're really doing is hiding behind an excuse. We tell ourselves we're looking for clarity, but the truth is clarity only comes after we've started, after we've put in the work, after we've shown up again and again. Think about the moments in your life where you've made progress, real progress. Did those moments happen because the universe sent you a flashing neon signal? Or did they happen because you showed up and kept showing up until something finally clicked? There's a reason the word discipline feels heavy. It's because it demands something from us that inspiration never will. Inspiration is like a gust of wind. It's exciting. It pushes you forward for a moment and then it disappears. Discipline is the steady walk in the same direction, rain or shine. It's boring. It's repetitive. It's not glamorous, but it works. I've seen people wait years for a sign to start writing the book they've been dreaming about. They tell themselves they're waiting for the right idea or waiting until life settles down. The problem is life never settles down. The inbox never empties. The schedule never magically clears. And that right idea, it doesn't arrive while you're sitting on the couch. It arrives when you're deep in the work, wrestling with sentences, deleting paragraphs, rewriting pages. The difference between people who get somewhere and people who stay stuck is not the size of their dreams, it's the structure they give those dreams. A dream without a schedule is just a wish. A dream with a schedule becomes a plan, and a plan executed consistently becomes a reality. This is why you don't need a sign, you need a schedule. A schedule changes the question from should I do this today to what time am I doing this today? It removes the debate. It removes the bargaining you do with yourself when you're tired or busy or unmotivated. When it's in the calendar, it's happening. And here's the thing. You don't have to feel ready to follow a schedule. That's the beauty of it. In fact, most of the time, you won't feel ready. But when you've committed to something at a set time, over and over again, readiness stops being the gatekeeper. You stop waiting for permission from your feelings. Some people say, but what if I don't feel creative at that time? Or what if I'm not in the mood? The answer is simple, you show up anyway. Because creativity, progress, breakthroughs, they're not always there when you arrive, but they do show up more often when they know where to find you. If you keep showing up in the same place at the same time, doing the same work, eventually your mind learns. This is when we perform. It's not unlike training your body. If you go to the gym only when you feel like it, you'll go 3 times a month, maybe. But if you commit to showing up at 7 a.m. every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, eventually your body starts to expect it. The soreness doesn't stop you. The weather doesn't stop you. The excuses get quieter. You've built a ritual, and rituals build results. That's the part nobody tells you about discipline. It actually becomes easier over time, not harder. The hardest part is starting without a sign. The hardest part is showing up before you feel ready, before you feel good at it, before you feel like it's worth it. But think about the alternative. If you spend your life waiting for a sign, you surrender control to something outside of you. You're saying, I'm not moving until something else tells me to. That's giving away your future to chance. When you schedule something, you take back the control. You say, I decide when the work begins. I decide how often it happens. I decide what I'm building. That's not arrogance. That's ownership. There's a beautiful thing that happens when you stop waiting for a sign and start following a schedule. You become the sign. People around you notice the way you show up. They see the changes. They feel the consistency in your energy. And suddenly, you're the one who inspires others to start. And here's where the magic really lies. Once you start, the signs will come. Not because they were waiting for the perfect time, but because you've finally given them something to attach to. Opportunities tend to appear when they know you're prepared to take them. People start reaching out because they've seen you do the work. The momentum you've built draws things towards you that waiting never could. But it's only visible in the rearview mirror. At the start, it's just you, the schedule, and a lot of days where nothing feels like it's happening. That's the unglamorous truth about real progress. It's often invisible for a long time. You might go weeks, months, even years before you feel like it's paying off. But when it does, it compounds in ways you can't imagine. Suddenly the person you were before, the one waiting for a sign, feels like a stranger. So if you're stuck right now, if you're sitting around hoping for the universe to send you a lightning bolt of clarity, here's the reality. The lightning bolt isn't coming. The clouds aren't going to part. No one is going to knock on your door and say, now is the time. The time is when you put it in the calendar. The time is when you commit to doing it, whether you feel like it or not. The time is when you stop asking for permission to start. You don't need a sign. You need a schedule, and the schedule you keep will become the proof you were looking for all along. If you want, I can now take Keynote 2 and expand it into the same long, emotionally driven style so the speech flows from point to point like a live stage talk. That way you'll have the full structure for a 25-30-minute motivational piece. It feels like a spark, sudden electric alive. One moment you're drifting, the next moment you're filled with possibility. Ideas flood in energy surges, and for a brief time you believe you could do anything. We love that feeling because it makes us feel unstoppable. But here's the problem. Inspiration is fickle. It comes when it wants to, and it leaves without warning. You can't make it arrive on command. You can't circle a date on the calendar and say, that's the day I'll be inspired. It doesn't work that way. And yet so many of us live as if it does. We wait for inspiration before we start the project. We wait for the right mood before we make the call. We wait for the perfect surge of motivation before we take the first step toward the thing we've been putting off. And when it doesn't come, we tell ourselves it's not the right time. But that's just the story we use to justify doing nothing. Discipline, on the other hand, doesn't care if you're inspired or not. Discipline doesn't ask how you feel. It doesn't need you to be in the mood. Discipline says, we're doing this because it's what we said we would do. And when it comes to building anything meaningful, a business, a skill, a career, a relationship, even a life you're proud of, discipline will take you farther than inspiration ever could. The tricky part is discipline isn't as exciting. It doesn't give you that sudden rush. In fact, most of the time, it feels like work, repetitive, ordinary, unremarkable work. It's getting up when you'd rather sleep in. It's sitting down at your desk when the couch looks more inviting. It's going to the gym when the weather's bad and your body feels sluggish. It's showing up for the conversation even when you know it will be difficult. And yet, this is the work that moves us forward. Inspiration can start the fire, but only discipline can keep it burning. That's because inspiration lives in moments, but discipline lives in habits. Moments fade, habits last. If you look at anyone who's accomplished something remarkable, you'll see a common thread. They didn't rely on inspiration to carry them. They relied on showing up. They did the work on the days they didn't feel like it. They stayed committed when there was no applause, no recognition, no obvious progress. That's the hardest part to grasp, that most progress happens without feeling like progress at all. The musician practicing scales alone in a small room isn't feeling inspired every second. The writer staring at a blinking cursor for hours isn't feeling a constant flood of ideas. The athlete running drills in the rain isn't feeling a surge of joy with every step. But they're doing it because discipline says, keep going. This matters. We have this romantic idea that the people who achieve great things are somehow gifted with constant inspiration. We imagine they wake up every day overflowing with energy and motivation. The truth is, they wake up like everyone else. They have bad days. They doubt themselves. They get bored. They get tired. The difference is, they don't let those feelings decide whether they'll take action. When you depend on inspiration to move forward, you become a hostage to your own emotions. On the good days, you're flying. On the bad days, you're standing still. Over time, that inconsistency erodes your confidence because deep down you know you're not in control. Your moods are. Discipline changes that. Discipline says the action is non-negotiable. It removes the bargaining process from your mind. You no longer ask, do I feel like it today? You simply do it because that's what you've committed to. There's a kind of quiet power in that. When you live by discipline, you stop needing the emotional high of inspiration to get started. You learn that progress isn't about feeling ready. It's about showing up whether you feel ready or not. And here's the interesting thing, the more you practice discipline, the more often inspiration shows up anyway. It's as if inspiration learns your schedule and decides to meet you there. You sit down to write, and suddenly ideas come more easily. You lace up your shoes for a run, and the energy arrives halfway through. You start the meeting, and the creativity flows in the middle of the conversation. That's not luck. That's the reward for showing up consistently. I once knew a designer who made it a rule to work on his craft every single morning from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m., no matter what. He didn't care if the work felt good, if the ideas felt fresh, or if the results were impressive. He just kept showing up. Over time, something remarkable happened. His skill skyrocketed. Not because he suddenly became more inspired than everyone else, but because his consistency gave him more opportunities for inspiration to find him. It's like fishing. If you only cast your line into the water when you think the fish are biting, you might go home empty-handed more often than not. But if you show up at the river every day, you're going to catch more fish, not because the fish like you better, but because you're there more often. The truth is, inspiration is unreliable. Discipline is dependable. And dependability beats brilliance when brilliance can't be counted on. You can be the most talented person in the world, but if you only act when you feel like it, you'll lose to the person who acts no matter how they feel. That's why the people we admire often seem so calm in their approach. They're not riding the emotional roller coaster of waiting for inspiration. They've built a system that works regardless of their mood. They trust the process more than the spark. And here's the part that surprises most people. Discipline isn't about being hard on yourself. It's about taking care of yourself. It's about creating a structure that supports your goals, so you're not constantly burning energy deciding whether or not to take action. It frees you from the mental tug of war between I should and I don't feel like it. When you start to see discipline this way, it becomes less about forcing yourself and more about honoring yourself. You're saying, I value my future enough to act today, even if I don't feel like it. That's not punishment. That's respect. If you're waiting to feel inspired before you move, you might be waiting for the rest of your life. But if you commit to moving regardless, you'll start to see results far sooner than you think. And those results will bring their own kind of inspiration, the deep, steady kind that comes from knowing you can trust yourself to show up. The beautiful thing is, once you've built that trust, it spills into every part of your life. You start showing up for your health, your relationships, your work, your personal growth. You start realizing that you're capable of much more than you thought, not because you suddenly became more inspired, but because you stopped needing to be inspired in order to act. In the end, inspiration is like the weather. It's nice when it's sunny, but you can't control when the clouds roll in. Discipline is the shelter you build so you can keep going rain or shine. It's what allows you to keep walking forward when the wind is against you. And when the sun does come out, you'll already be miles ahead, because you didn't stop to wait for it. That's the choice in front of all of us. Will we wait for the perfect conditions, or will we build the kind of consistency that makes progress inevitable? One path feels exciting but leaves us stuck. The other feels ordinary but leads us somewhere extraordinary. The question isn't whether inspiration will come. The question is whether you'll keep going when it doesn't. And that's the difference that changes everything. If you'd like, I can now expand Keynote 3 in the same tone, so the whole speech series flows like a continuous talk, with each point naturally building on the last. That way it reads like one cohesive 30-minute stage delivery. We like to think success is about big moments, the breakthrough idea, the massive opportunity, the day it all finally happens. But if you look closely at how those moments come to life, you'll see they are almost always built on something much smaller, something far less glamorous ritual. The quiet, consistent, repetitive actions you take over and over again until they become so ingrained in you that you don't even think about them anymore. A ritual is more than a habit. A habit is something you do without much thought. A ritual is something you do with intention. It's a promise you've made to yourself that this action matters enough to protect it. A ritual says, this is non-negotiable. This is part of who I am. The world is full of people with ambition. We all have dreams, visions, things we'd like to achieve. But very few people have the structure to sustain the work that's required. It's not that they aren't capable. It's that they treat their goal like an option instead of an appointment. And when something is optional, it's the first thing to disappear when life gets busy. A ritual fixes that. When you make your goal part of a schedule, when you assign it a time, a place, and a process, you stop relying on willpower. Willpower is like a battery. It runs out. Ritual is like an electrical connection. It keeps flowing as long as you keep showing up. Think about someone training for a marathon. If they waited until they felt like running, they'd probably run once or twice a week at most. But marathon runners don't do that. They have training schedules. They know which days are long runs, which days are recovery, which days are sprints. It's not a decision they make when they wake up. It's a decision they made months ago when they committed to the race. The ritual isn't there to make the work easier. It's there to make the work inevitable. Because the truth is there will be days you don't want to do it. Days when the weather is bad, your energy is low, your motivation is gone. Without a ritual, those days will win. With a ritual, you still show up, and by showing up, you stay in the game. There's another reason rituals are powerful. They signal to your mind and body that it's time to perform. Athletes know this. A basketball player might bounce the ball the same way before every free throw. A musician might go through the same warm-up before every performance. A writer might brew a specific cup of coffee before sitting down to type. These small actions send a message to the brain. We're doing this now. Over time, your mind responds faster, your focus sharpens more quickly, and your resistance fades. It's easy to underestimate this because it's so simple. How can making a cup of coffee at the same time each morning possibly change anything? But that's the beauty of ritual. It's not about the coffee, it's about the consistency. It's about training yourself to associate a certain time, place, and action with the work you want to do. Without rituals, every day is a negotiation. Should I do it now? Should I wait until later? Should I skip it today and double up tomorrow? And the problem with negotiations is that they drain energy. By the time you've decided, you're often too tired to follow through. Rituals remove that negotiation entirely. You don't have to decide, you've already decided. Some people resist this idea because they think it will make their life rigid, but it's actually the opposite. Rituals create freedom. When you know exactly when you'll work on something, you don't have to carry the mental burden of wondering if you'll get to it. You can be fully present in the rest of your day because you've protected the time for what matters most. And here's where it gets interesting. The results from rituals don't come all at once. They accumulate quietly. You don't notice the change after a week, maybe not even after a month. But 6 months in, a year in, you realize you've built something solid, skill, progress, resilience, simply because you kept showing up. This is why so many people quit too early. They mistake the lack of immediate results for a lack of progress. They don't realize that the work they're doing today might not show its value until much later. Rituals are an act of faith. They say, I believe the outcome will come, even if I can't see it yet. There's another subtle power in rituals. They become part of your identity. When you do something often enough, you stop thinking, I'm trying to be a runner, and start thinking, I'm a runner. You stop thinking, I'm trying to write a book, and start thinking, I'm a writer. The action shapes the identity, and the identity makes the action even more natural. This is why rituals create results, because results are not built in one grand effort. They are built in small, repeated actions that compound over time. The book is not written in one weekend of inspiration. It's written in daily pages. The business is not built in one lucky break. It's built in countless hours of preparation before the opportunity arrives. The strong body is not made in one intense workout. It's built in the rhythm of consistent training. People often ask, how do I stay motivated? The answer is you don't. You stay committed. Motivation is a feeling. Commitment is a choice. Rituals are how you live out that choice. They don't care about your mood, your energy level, or the weather outside. They exist to make sure the work gets done anyway. And here's the truth most people don't want to admit. Discipline without ritual is fragile. You can have the willpower to push through a few hard days, maybe even a few hard weeks, but over the long term, without a structure to anchor you, life will pull you off course. Unexpected events will pop up. Urgent tasks will demand your attention. And without something in place to protect the time, the important work will always lose to the urgent. Ritual is that protection. It's the guardrail that keeps you on the road, even when distractions and setbacks try to push you off. Of course, not all rituals are helpful. We can just as easily build rituals that hold us back. Checking our phone first thing in the morning, procrastinating in the same ways every afternoon, putting off uncomfortable tasks until the last minute. The challenge is to replace the rituals that drain us with the rituals that build us. That process starts small. You don't need to overhaul your entire life in 1 week. You just need to pick one thing and give it a time, a place, and a process. Then protect it fiercely. Treat it like you would any other important meeting. You wouldn't cancel on your boss at the last minute without a good reason. So don't cancel on yourself either. Over time, that one ritual will create momentum. Momentum makes it easier to add a second ritual, and then a third. Before you know it, you've built a life that runs on purposeful rhythms instead of chaotic reactions. And when life does get chaotic, because your rituals will be there to steady you, they'll give you something to hold on to, something you can trust, something that says, no matter what's happening out there, this part of my day is mine. In the end, rituals aren't just about getting things done. They're about becoming someone who does the things that matter. They're about building a life that aligns with your values and your vision. One small action at a time, so don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait for the wave of motivation that never lasts. Show up for it, protect it, and trust that in time the results will come quietly, steadily, and in ways you can't yet imagine. Because success doesn't belong to the person who works the hardest once. It belongs to the person who works consistently day after day until the work becomes who they are. Life is unpredictable. It doesn't matter how carefully you plan, how organized you think you are, or how optimistic you feel in the morning, something will always come along to disrupt it. A meeting runs long, the weather changes. Someone you care about needs your attention. An opportunity pops up out of nowhere, and it forces you to rearrange everything. Most people treat these disruptions as if they're a reason to stop moving. They think, well, I guess today's not the day. I'll try again tomorrow. The problem with that approach is that tomorrow will have its own disruptions. And the day after that, and the day after that. Life is not going to slow down and make things easier for you. The world isn't going to clear a path and say, here, now you can pursue your goals without any obstacles. If you're waiting for things to calm down before you start, you'll be waiting forever. That's why you need something stronger than motivation. You need a compass. Something that keeps you pointed in the right direction, no matter how much the terrain changes around you. A schedule works like that compass. It doesn't remove the obstacles, but it makes sure you keep moving in the right direction, even if you have to go slower, even if you have to take detours. Here's the key difference. Without a schedule, you spend every day asking yourself if you're going to do the work. With a schedule, the only question is when. That subtle shift changes everything. Think about someone who's committed to exercising 3 days a week at 6 a.m. Whether it's raining, snowing, or sunny outside, they know where they'll be at 6 a.m. on those days. They don't waste energy deciding. They don't debate with themselves. They just do it. That's the power of a schedule. It removes the decision-making process that can drain your willpower before you've even started. Now imagine someone who says, I'll work out when I feel like it or when I have time. That person might have good intentions, but they're leaving their progress up to chance. They're relying on a set of conditions. Time, energy, mood. That will almost never line up perfectly. And so, more often than not, the workout doesn't happen. The same principle applies to any goal. Whether it's building a business, writing a book, learning a skill, or improving your health, the work needs to happen consistently, not occasionally. And consistency doesn't happen by accident. It happens by design. It's the schedule is that design. It's the structure that ensures the work gets done regardless of how you feel or what's happening around you. Some people hear the word schedule and immediately think it sounds restrictive. They think it's about losing freedom. But it's actually the opposite. A schedule gives you freedom because it takes away the constant mental noise of deciding when or whether to act. It frees your mind from the endless loop of negotiation with yourself. Once something is scheduled, it's no longer a question, it's a commitment. And commitments are powerful because they change the way you see yourself. If you keep a commitment to yourself over and over again, you start to believe, I'm the kind of person who follows through. That belief is one of the most valuable things you can have because it affects everything else you do. Of course, a schedule doesn't guarantee that every day will go perfectly. Life will still throw you off sometimes. But here's the difference: if you miss a day and you're running on inspiration, it can take you weeks to get started again. If you miss a day and you're running on a schedule, you simply return to the next slot you've already planned. You don't spiral into guilt or procrastination. You just pick up where you left off. This is why some people seem unstoppable. It's not that they never miss a day or never face setbacks. It's that they've built a system that makes it almost impossible to fall completely off track. They don't rely on perfect conditions. They rely on a rhythm they can return to again and again. I've seen people who are incredibly talented stall out for years because they only worked when they felt ready. And I've seen people with far less raw talent make extraordinary progress because they worked on a schedule and stuck to it. Talent matters, but not as much as consistency. And consistency is built on structure. A schedule also forces you to make choices about your time. When you block time for the things that matter, you're making a statement about your priorities. You're saying, this is important enough to protect. Without that level of clarity, your time will get eaten up by the urgent but unimportant. Emails, errands, other people's requests. A schedule is how you protect the important from being swallowed by the urgent. Another thing happens when you follow a schedule. You stop waiting for motivation to show up before you start. You start to realize that motivation often arrives after you begin, not before. You may sit down to work feeling tired, distracted, or uninspired, but once you've been in it for a few minutes, your focus starts to build. You get into a flow. You feel the satisfaction of making progress. That's the beauty of a schedule. It gives you the starting point that motivation can then build on. This is also how you build resilience. When you keep showing up despite the obstacles, you prove to yourself that you can keep going no matter what. That proof becomes a deep well of confidence you can draw from the next time things get tough. You stop doubting whether you'll make it through and start trusting that you will. The truth is, life will never stop testing you. There will always be another challenge, another distraction, another reason to wait. But when you have a schedule, those challenges become bumps in the road instead of roadblocks. You may slow down, but you don't stop. You may take a detour, but you still know where you're headed. And over time, that steadiness compounds. People will look at what you've accomplished and call it determination, drive, maybe even luck. But you'll know the truth. It was the schedule. It was the simple, unglamorous act of showing up again and again, regardless of how you felt or what was happening around you. That's the difference between people who wish and people who achieve. Wishing is passive. Scheduling is active. Wishing leaves your future in the hands of chance. Scheduling puts it back in your hands. So the next time life gets chaotic, and it will ask yourself, am I going to let this chaos decide for me, or am I going to stick to the plan I've committed to? Because the schedule isn't just about getting things done. It's about who you become in the process. It's about becoming the kind of person who keeps moving forward no matter what. And when you are that kind of person, you don't just reach your goals, you create a life where momentum is always on your side. We're all looking for proof. Proof that we're making the right choices. Proof that we're heading in the right direction. Proof that all the effort, all the hours, all the sacrifices are going to be worth it in the end. We think this proof will come in the form of a sign, a sudden breakthrough, a big opportunity, someone important telling us, Yaz, you're on the right track. And when we don't see that proof, when the signs aren't obvious, we start to doubt ourselves. But the truth is, the real sign you're looking for is not out there. It's not in some external event or someone else's approval. The real sign is in the fact that you keep showing up. Consistency is the sign, it's the evidence. We have a tendency to undervalue the act of simply showing up. We think it only counts if the day is productive, if the results are impressive, if we have something tangible to hold at the end of it. But showing up, even on the days when nothing seems to happen, is what keeps the door open for results to arrive. It's what keeps the momentum alive. Think about it, if you only work on your goal when you feel motivated or when you see progress, you'll end up working on it far less than you need to. The spaces in between will stretch longer and longer, and the momentum you built will fade. But when you commit to showing up no matter what, when it's in the calendar, when it's part of your schedule, you keep the progress going even if it's microscopic. And here's the thing about microscopic progress, it compounds. 1% better every day doesn't feel like much in the moment, but over time it's transformative. The people who reach their goals aren't the ones who made massive leaps in short bursts. They're the ones who made steady steps for a long time. Consistency has another powerful effect. It changes the way you see yourself. Every time you show up, you cast a vote for the kind of person you want to be. If you want to be a writer, showing up to write every day is a vote for that identity. If you want to be an athlete, showing up to train is a vote for that identity. Over time, those votes add up, and you begin to believe it. And when you believe it, acting like it becomes second nature. Of course, this isn't glamorous. It's not exciting to say, I've done the work for 73 days in a row. It's not headline material. But it's the foundation of every achievement that looks impressive from the outside. The mountain is climbed one step at a time, not in a single leap. The challenge is that consistency often feels invisible. You don't always see the payoff right away. You may go weeks or months without any obvious result. This is where most people quit, not because they can't do the work, but because they can't see the reward yet. They mistake the lack of visible progress for a lack of actual progress. But the truth is, most progress happens beneath the surface. Like roots growing underground before a plant breaks through the soil, your consistency is building something you can't see yet. Then one day, seemingly out of nowhere, the results appear, and people call it an overnight success. There's no such thing as overnight success. There's only the moment when the work you've been doing consistently becomes visible to the world. That's why showing up matters more than any sign. The sign isn't going to appear first and then convince you to show up. It's the other way around. You show up first, and the signs appear later. This is also why discipline matters so much. On the days you don't feel like it, on the days you're tired or distracted or unmotivated, discipline is what gets you to show up anyway. You can't rely on motivation to do that for you because motivation comes and goes. But a commitment to consistency, enforced by a schedule you actually follow, will keep you going through the dips. And here's the beautiful part, consistency becomes its own reward. Once you've built a streak, once you've kept a promise to yourself over and over again, you start to feel a quiet pride in it. You start to realize you can trust yourself to follow through. That trust becomes fuel. It makes you less likely to quit because you don't want to break the chain. It's the same reason professional athletes train even in the off season. It's not just about improving, it's about maintaining the rhythm. Stopping completely makes it harder to start again. Staying consistent keeps the gears turning so you're always ready when it's time to perform. And this isn't just about achieving goals, it's about resilience. Life will knock you down. You will face setbacks. You will have days where everything goes wrong. But if you've built a habit of showing up, you know how to get back on track. You know how to take the next step without overthinking it. Consistency builds that muscle. Some people hear all this and think it sounds boring, too structured, too repetitive. But what's really boring is watching years go by while you keep waiting for the perfect sign to start. What's really repetitive is telling yourself over and over again, I'll start tomorrow, and then never doing it. Consistency is not the enemy of freedom. It's the foundation of it. When you know you'll show up for the work no matter what, you free yourself from the stress and guilt of wondering if you're doing enough. You can rest fully because you know you've kept your promise for the day. You can take opportunities without fear because you know you're prepared. And preparation is where luck comes from. People say someone got lucky because they happened to be in the right place at the right time. But the reason they were in the right place at the right time is because they kept showing up. They were ready when the opportunity arrived because they'd been doing the work all along. That's why you can't wait for a sign. You become the sign by your consistency. You become the proof you were looking for. You show the world, and more importantly, yourself, that you're serious, that you're committed, that you're in it for the long haul. One day, you will look back and realize that the schedule you kept, the days you showed up without fail, were the real turning point. Not the one big moment you thought you were waiting for, but the countless small moments where you chose to keep going. And when that day comes, you'll understand something important. You were never looking for a sign. You were looking for the confidence that comes from showing up again and again until the work became part of who you are. That's the real evidence. That's the real victory. The sign isn't out there somewhere in the future. The sign is in your calendar. The sign is in your routine. The sign is in the fact that tomorrow, just like yesterday, you'll be there doing the work.